candidates are pretty much along the same line in their responses. So I'm going to ask some of the questions that we hadn't intended. We didn't know if we'd have enough time or not, okay? And we'll just have you each respond to them and add to what the others have said. The first one is, Amendment 4 on the ballot this year would restore voting rights to convicted felons, except for murderers and sex offenders. Do you support this amendment?
Absolutely, 100%. 1.7 million former felons in this state. We still pull up the rear when it comes to real civil rights in this state. This is a bastion of the Jim Crow South, where you still have to go and sit before the governor and his honorable cabinet to beg to have your rights restored. And y'all, if you've never seen this process, pull it up online. Look at one of the proceedings. I got to observe one where this woman went in, and middle-aged African-American woman, and she had her rights taken away, and she had been petitioning to have those rights restored. And she gets up, and the cabinet begins to ask her questions, and the governor asks her something like, are you a drinker? When was the last time you had a drink? Are you a smoker? When was the last time you had a smoke? The indignity of that. Irrelevant questions. I hope that Floridians will organize and that we will overwhelmingly, this upcoming November, restore rights to former felons and put us on the road to the 21st century and out of where we currently are, which is us, Mississippi and Alabama are the three that have this distinction. I want to be a leader, but I want to be a leader in the right direction and not the wrong direction. Let's pass Amendment 4 and no more, by the way. Amendment 4 and no more.
So Bob, I am on day 5 of a statewide tour we call Turning the Tide. And it's the first real big criminal justice comprehensive plan that's been put forward in this campaign for governor. And one of the things I've been arguing is that over the last 2 decades, Florida has become a national leader in the wrong thing, in locking people up. You know, our mass incarceration problem in Florida is a giant one. You know, it has doubled. Our rates of mass incarceration since 2005 have doubled. We're above the national average. If you're from New York, we incarcerate twice as many people here in Florida per capita as New York. Wow. It is a big deal. And if you are African American, you're 4 times as likely in the state of Florida to be a victim of mass incarceration. And so I came out with a big idea, a big, bold plan this week that I've been working on for the last year. And it's to say that if I'm governor, our vision is that over the next 10 years in Florida, we want to reduce mass incarceration of nonviolent offenders by 50%, 25% in 5 years. And we're going to support a whole number of policies that good states, Republican and Democrat, have done to do just that. I also came out and I said, I will bring an end to private prisons in the state of Florida. I also came out and I said, I will be the first candidate in a generation who will unequivocally say, I oppose the death penalty and will do everything in my power to end this state. Those are the types of big ideas, in addition to the restoration of rights, that create a more fair state, a more just state, and a state of the future.
Thank you.
I think you'd be hard-pressed to find a Democratic candidate for governor that doesn't agree, okay? So it's not a matter of agreeing. We all agree. We all believe this is a state of second chances. This is a nation of second chances. I believe it's pretty much the platform for all the candidates up here. But you know, folks, we have a lot of people in prison for crimes they shouldn't be in prison for. For example, marijuana, okay? So, as I say to you again, it's not about what you're going to do. Show me what you've done. And as the mayor of Miami Beach, we decriminalized marijuana in Miami Beach, okay? Because you know what? Not only do we not want to ruin people's lives and send them to prison, we want to make sure you can get into the armed services. We want to make sure you can get into that college. We want to make sure you can get that job. So talk is cheap. Action is what counts. And I can tell you, when we passed that, we had a lot of opposition going for it, but we did it because it was the right thing to do. And if I'm honored to be governor, not only will we make sure that fellas have their rights restored, we'll make sure the process is fast. Because as people know about me, I'm the most impatient person alive in the state of Florida. And I like getting things done. And that's what we're going to make sure. But not only going to get rid of private prisons, we're going to make sure we have a certified second chance program. So if you have committed a crime and now you can't get housing or you can't get a job, we're going to put a state program together where the state will bond you to find a place to live and get a job with no risk to your employer going forward. And that's what I plan to do if I'm honored to be governor. Thank you.
Thank you. The next question, and since we're all answering those, I'll start with Mr. King this time. How would you address the overwhelming debt incurred by our youth in obtaining a college education?
This is a huge problem across the nation. You know, Mary Levine talks about what we have done. You know, one of the things that I am so proud of is that 4 or 5 years ago, we started a program in Central Florida that is now in all of our Title I high schools, partnered with University of Central Florida, the largest state institution in Florida, sending low-income, highly talented, first-generation students, immigrants, dreamers, undocumented students to college, and making it possible for them to afford higher education. And we've sent dozens and dozens of students. Just last week, we had an award ceremony for 18 new scholars, and then we were honoring the 12 scholars who were going off to places like Duke and Wake Forest and University of Florida and places all across the United States. And you know, working with these students over all these years in these public high schools, I learned intimately that talent is equally distributed. It's everywhere, but opportunity is not. And the challenge of great leadership is creating the types of programs and initiatives that allow talent to grow and thrive. That's why I'm so proud this campaign has introduced a program for free community college and trade school. Imagine how radical that would be in the Sunshine State. Other great states are doing it. Tennessee, Maryland just did it 2 weeks ago because they have found that this is an extraordinary way to teach and train the workforce of the future and make trade school and public education dreams come true for so many students who have not done that. That's what I'm for. That's what I'll be supporting. It's one of my major priorities as governor of Florida.
Thank you.
Thank you. You know, we have a program called Bright Futures in Florida. Unfortunately, if your grades are high enough, you'll actually get it. But if they're not, and if you come from an economically disadvantaged background, unfortunately, you will not be able to get that type of scholarship. You know, some people call the Bright Futures program, they call it the Mustang program. You know why? Because a lot of times they're wealthy families that get these scholarships, and when they don't have to pay for college, they get to buy their kid a Mustang afterwards, okay? Well, I have a different type of scholarship, I believe. And I believe if your parents can't afford to send you to college, we should make sure you can go to college debt-free if you commit to work in our state for a certain amount of years after you graduate. That's a different type of program. Matter of fact, I think I want to call it the washing a car scholarship or something like that. Because I know I wash more cars in Florida than I think any other human being possibly did. And I believe that we need vocational training. We need to make sure that if you're in high school, you gotta have a plan. If you're not going to college or you're not going to the armed services, we want to make sure we train you to earn a decent living after you graduate, okay? And that needs to be a scholarship program. It needs to teach you to be an air conditioning repair person or a welder or a boat builder, whatever it may be. We need to put a program together that you can go and you will not be burdened with crazy amounts of debt. Why? Not just because it's the right thing to do, but it will help us create a 21st century economy, and that's what we need to do in the state of Florida going forward. Thank you.
So college affordability is a real deal. I mean, I had classmates who, on the way to getting a bachelor's degree, spent 6 years trying to get a 4-year degree, or 8 years trying to get a 4-year degree because they had to put themselves through school by working. So they take a semester off and then get one on and another one off. And so what we propose is that we've got a number of public sector jobs in this state that right now are unable to fill the job vacancies that they have. We've got a teacher shortage in the state of Florida. We have a nursing shortage in the state of Florida. Even, believe it or not, we are having a difficult time in recruiting a diversified workforce to enter into law enforcement. Even forestry workers in this state. So what we've said is that if you're willing to commit to spend 4 years in that sector here in the state of Florida, we will pay for your education. If you want to be a teacher, you go to school here in the state of Florida, and we will forgive your loans here in the state of Florida if you teach in a Florida public school as a way of incentivizing teachers to go into that work. The workforce is important. You heard me earlier talk about the necessary training that's required, because while college worked for me, as I said before, for my older siblings, it was again those tech-related jobs. I competed for and won as mayor of the city of Tallahassee, only one of 2 cities in the state to receive this designation from during the Obama administration, the tech hire workforce. And what that meant is they leaned into the skills that we were trying to develop in this workforce to fit in the tech-related jobs that exist today. And when I say tech, I don't mean just sitting somewhere and writing code. I also mean the technician who works at Radiology and Associates, who learns new imaging software that takes a good picture that the radiologist then interprets. You don't need a college degree for that, but you do need some additional skills in order to do it. And because half the people in this state aren't able to earn enough to take care of themselves and their family, let's give them the skill that they need to have the dignity around work. Dignity around work.
Thank you. Mayor Levine, Florida has received a D rating on women's employment and earnings, which vary considerably by race and ethnicity. How would you address this?
A great president once said that a rising tide lifts all ships, and that was President Kennedy. And the only way we're going to be able to raise the tide, and I don't mean the sea level, folks, okay? The only way we're going to be able to raise the economic tide in Florida is to create a 21st century economy, and I think I'm uniquely able to do that, having come from the private sector. What do we need to do? Number one, we need to invest in our schools. Number two, we need to have health insurance, health coverage for everybody. Number three, we need the best environmental policy. Number four, we need the toughest, strongest non-discrimination laws. Number five, we need to make sure that we have great public transportation. And by the way, don't take it from me. Just take a look at the human resource manual of the most admired countries in America, because what I just said comes from their HR manual. And in order for us to attract these great companies to Florida, that's of course if we don't want a state full of Walmarts, Applebee's, and McDonald's, and everyone's making $8.25 an hour, we're going to need to up our game. And by upping our game, that means investing in Floridians. It doesn't mean giving corporate incentives to bribe companies to come to Florida, because I can tell you something. Amazon, they're not coming to Florida because somehow someone's going to stroke them a $20 million check when they're a $50 billion, $100 billion company. They're going to come to Florida if we have the right stuff going forward. Can you imagine Jeff Bezos, CEO of Amazon, out there in Seattle, Washington, looking at where he's going to put his $5 billion and his 50,000 new employees? Do you know what he's looking at? He turns to Florida and he sees, okay, education. Florida, you're ranked 45th. Your teachers make $10,000 less than the national average. You know what he says? He says, next. And he looks at another state. So in order for us to have everybody rise, everyone have greater economic opportunities, we need to begin investing in Floridians.
I think the question was specific to women and minorities and the disparities that exist, particularly in the economic environment. And I think it's an important question, especially when you consider that, for instance, women-owned and particularly black women businesses that go to compete for venture funding, venture capital funding, are something like 8 to 10 times less likely to get access to those dollars when compared to white males. There's a serious disparity that exists. So let's talk about what the Florida governor can do. The Florida government has something like a pension fund and an investment portfolio of somewhere nearing $200 billion. That's B, with a billion. Of that billion, 1.5% of that has to be set aside to invest in Florida-specific companies. It amounts to a little over $100 billion. Yet there is no descriptor on that those dollars have to be particularly curtailed to or focused on minority and women-owned businesses. I believe that women-owned businesses and minority-owned businesses help to enrich and enlarge this state. This state roughly has 47 people of color. And they ought to be able to benefit from the spending and the buying power of the state of Florida. Corporate boards that have more women on them are less likely to end up having corrupt practices. That's a fact. That's a fact. And so we have to be for these things, not because it is politically convenient. We got to be for them because they actually impact the bottom line. They create the kind of businesses and industries and workforce and put people into the rooms where it happened, to steal from a famous line. It puts people in the rooms where it happens that changes culture, that changes economic circumstances and environments, that disrupts poverty, that puts people on a pathway to success. And everybody in this state ought to be able to benefit from that largesse. Women, men, minority-owned businesses, and the like. Thank you.
So I think it starts a question of values. Who are you and what do you care for and how are you going to represent that in your leadership? You know, in my company and organizations, I learned early the power of diversity to serve our customer with excellence. And so, you know, I learned it almost too well. We have, I think, 15 general managers and they're all women because we learned who was serving our customer with excellence all throughout our company. You know, one of the things we've talked about all across the state of Florida and the women's movement and the women's marches and the Me Too movement have been a big aspect of this campaign all across Florida. And the power of this moment to change institutions and to change what has been a toxic culture in Tallahassee as it relates particularly to women. We've watched it this year where a number of Florida senators in Tallahassee did bad things and the culture in that place was exposed. You know, I often wonder, my wife and I, who is an extraordinary woman, we often wonder as we're speaking to these issues, is it getting through to our daughter? And is it getting through to our politics all throughout the state? And we were at a women's march speaking to tens of thousands of people in Orlando a number of months ago. And I was so proud as I was up there talking about some of these issues and the moment we're in to change the tide. I looked down at my 9-year-old daughter who's on the front row. I kid you not, she's discovered a love for reading and the Harry Potter series. I looked down at her, she's holding up, as I'm up on stage talking about this moment, a poster that says, "Without Hermione, Harry Potter would have died in book 1, hashtag girl power." Hashtag girl power, 9 years old. Those are the moments that we have to celebrate, that we have to broadcast. And this governor, if I'm elected and if I get your vote, will be someone who fixes that culture in Tallahassee and no longer finds these gender inequities to be acceptable.
Thank you.